Okay, so today I'm going to talk about how to love yourself. And I will say right at the beginning of this message that depending on the life that you have lived, loving yourself in a very human, personal way might be a little bit different for you than it is for another person. So while there are certain universal truths like love is the universal healer, right? But the definition of love includes both male and female aspects of compassion and wisdom. So I'm going to talk about how I learned to love myself for whatever it's worth to you. And I recognize that what I've lived and the way that I've interpreted liberation and healing and all of that might not resonate with other people. It doesn't, it's okay with me. But I've found it so helpful in my own life. Actually, I would say the most helpful things that I have ever gained from other people was hearing their experiences. Because they, instead of being an expert or a philosopher or a therapist, like they were people that actually walked through the experience and they lived it, right? And so I'll tell you how I lived it for whatever it's worth. So I'm going to start with on the lower end of the emotional scale, right? If you are in an abusive pattern to yourself, and abusive could be like extreme codependency. It could be, in my case, it was bulimia. It could be any kind of addiction. One of the pitfalls of trying to love yourself in that state of energy, and what is absolutely essential to learn, is that sometimes it can feel so despicable, like whatever it is that you're doing, right? Whether it's like, oh God, why am I, like in my case, for example, I went through cancer and so much surgery and radiation, and I was still harming myself. And because I know that I am love, right? And I had at that point many mystical experiences and knowledge of what I am, to still be in that behavior was so painful. And part of my mind, like a more aggressive bullying part of my mind, would tell me like, God, you shouldn't be doing this to yourself anymore. You shouldn't be doing this to yourself anymore. You should be beyond this. And it's like, okay, but the reality is that I wasn't beyond it. Like I was still doing it. So in that situation, I had to ask myself, like, if I was like this for the rest of my life, right? If I was like this for the rest of my life, could I still love myself? Could I conceive that I am still worthy of love even though I am harming myself? Which the way that I harmed myself was the best that certain parts of me could figure out of how to create happiness, or really not even happiness, relief. So once I kind of lived with that question, and I said yes to that. I said, you know what? Yeah, I do deserve love no matter what I'm doing, no matter what I haven't figured out yet, no matter where I am in life. I do deserve love. I am love. And me as a human being, right? I do deserve love, and I am inherently valuable and worthy as I am right now of love, right? Even if I've never gotten it from the external world, right? I can give it to myself. Yeah, and I accept. If I am like this for the rest of my life, can I still love myself? The answer was yes. So from there, right, the way that I loved myself evolved. From there, it became implementing my divine male quality of wisdom, of setting intention, making decisions, right? Love is not just mercy and compassion. Love has both male and female qualities, which is mercy and compassion and unconditional embracing. And then maybe in other parts of your life, it might be more relevant for love to express itself in the form of wisdom, intention, decision, realizing I'm totally free and I actually have the freedom and the power to make decisions. But the first thing you must do is completely love and accept yourself exactly as you are, because if you can't do that part, you can't move to the other ways to love, like to the ways to move through up the emotional scale, right, to liberate the part of your mind that was stuck in maybe shame and guilt. The only way you can go beyond shame and guilt is to stop shaming and guilting yourself. You must stop, right? That's the first thing. To realize that what I'm doing by making myself feel badly for who I am is not working for me. It's just keeping me in a cycle of self-harm, of poor health, and of all sorts of other symptoms of that. So that's the first thing. Then, right, to start to set intentions and say, okay, I see that part of that behavior, part of what it entails is that I check out of my body. So I'm going to go on a journey to understand why that happens, right? Because I will tell you from experience that the experience of disassociating was so immediate and intense that for a while it didn't feel like I had any ability to do anything about it. But I would soon learn that that's actually not true. So what I learned, right, about disassociation was that I was stuck in an unconscious female energy, right? I'm so aware of my environment, and I am aware of my environment to the exclusion of being aware of my central channel, aware of my core, aware of my needs, aware of my personal desires and needs as a human being. So because all of my attention, right, was aware of environment as a child to keep me safe, the way that plays out in my adult life is that I get so overwhelmed by sensation that my nervous system can't handle it, which I'm going to get into this, and this might trigger some people, but actually your nervous system can handle it. It's that you haven't given yourself the wisdom that you need to trust that it can handle it. So I'll unpack that a little bit. So the disassociation was so intense, but I realized, okay, what I'm disassociating from is actually an emotion that I'm feeling and a belief that I have about myself. So I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to make the intention to, and granted, this involves learning, right? Because I really didn't know how to do this. This involves, right, contracting my root chakra and learning to anchor myself in my body and learning how to create frequencies, learning how to radiate and shine myself instead of being aware of environment, learning how to shine myself into reality, right? So that my awareness is of what I am radiating instead of what is happening in my environment. So that was a step that I needed to learn to take in order to learn how to love myself. I needed to understand, parts of my mind needed to understand that first, I am free. Two, that I am the creator and I can create with intention and decision and focus. I can create frequencies in my experience. I can create safety. I can create stability. No matter what is going on in my environment, no matter what the psychic energy is, I have the ability to create stability in my life. I have that power. And actually, that realization is what allowed spirit to come back in and stop disassociating from the nervous system. It's not that the nervous system wasn't equipped to experience the emotions. It's that there was a doubtful belief that I can't handle this. That, at least in my experience, again, please be your own advocate and your own healer. I'm just sharing what was so vital and helpful for me, again, for whatever it's worth. So when I realized that I had a belief that I couldn't handle the environment, and this is not demonizing, right, what we learned as children. This is just seeing it for what it is. The child says, I have no ability to handle this. I'm out of here, right? But the way that worked out for me later in life was to check out of my body, and then my body would go on autopilot and engage in addictive, physiologically abusive behavior that literally tore me to shreds in some ways, right? I went through cancer. I went through all kinds of severe digestive issues, partly because I was severely malnourished and because there was such a a battle within myself, a conflict between my male and female energy, which is one of the reasons why I talk so much about the importance of both the male and the female and how they operate in us. So learning to make decisions and intentions to say like, okay, today, to the best of my ability, I'm going to sit down with myself and I'm going to feel whatever I'm feeling. And I'm going to also acknowledge that the way that I feel about something matters. It's not always something that I must internalize and fix about myself. Sometimes the fact that I feel, very uncomfortable around certain energy is because my intelligence is picking up something real, and I'm getting feedback from myself, and to learn how to trust that, right? I have learned that over and over again, that things that I picked up on that to other people, pretty much to everyone in my environment, sounded illogical. It actually ended up being, later I would find out, truths that my intuition was telling me about in a feeling sense. So part of loving myself was like learning to trust myself. Trust is another thing. Trusting myself is something that creates internal silence, right? When I trust that I am source energy and the way that I am expressing is inherently valuable, right? This realization and embodiment of self-worth, that creates a lot of silence, because if I'm in self-worth, I'm no longer competing with anything. I no longer need to prove myself. I no longer need to validate my existence in any way, because I learned that I am inherently valuable just as I am, right? So that's another part of the way that I learned to love myself, really to educate the parts of my mind. And the way that you do this, right? I talked about this in early videos that I posted, but when you have a reactive self, right? You have a reaction. Instead of just disidentifying from the reaction, instead of just trying to fix it, right? What I would suggest, and something that may be useful, would be like, okay, what is this dialogue about? What is the source of this dialogue? When we don't feel something in the abdomen, it rises up and it becomes a dialogue, right? So ultimately, it's something that we are not allowing ourselves to feel, which is related to something, a belief that we are not allowing ourselves to see. So when I realized this, I said, okay, so when I have a reaction, or when I need life or somebody to do something, if I try to control reality in some way, that means that part of my mind doesn't know who she is. Doesn't know what it is. It's still trapped in a 3-year-old perspective, or a 4-year-old perspective, or a 5-year-old perspective. So part of what self-love turned into for me was, okay, every time I have a reaction, I'm going to stop escaping it. I'm going to stop avoiding it. I'm going to allow it to speak. And I'm going to say, okay, what is this about? Right? If I get angry at my partner for not doing something that I want him to do, like, what's going on there? Why do I feel this intense irritation in my solar plexus that ultimately, for me, right, turned into an ulcer? That was all about giving my power away to the anger I had at men, right? And ultimately at God, but as it is projected onto the Father, right? So first of all, just to pause really quickly, really what is essential in loving ourselves is the desire to love ourselves. If your desire to be free and to be loved and to love yourself is greater than your desire to stay trapped, then it will just happen, right? And the ways that it happens for you might be nuanced for you, depending on who you are and the life you've lived, and the information and the experiences that are pertinent to your existence. But desire creates. So if I have the strong desire to love myself, I'm going to figure out how to do it. So first, I'll just say, like, if you're on that journey, just trust that your desire will create the results that you want, but also to honor the particular ways, right, that you might need to learn how to love yourself. I've talked a lot about how, for me, like, learning about healthy male energy, about setting intentions, about, with love, setting intentions, making decisions, realizing that I am free and that I'm not obligated to do things that I don't want to do, right? Empowering parts of my mind that didn't know that. So for example, if you feel obligated to do something, right, that's not true. You're not obligated to do anything. So if you feel, for example, a lot of people, it's very typical in an awakening that like people lose all of their friends or so much of the external world, which is a really good thing because you have disentangled your energy from things that you created out of fear or out of not being authentic to who you really are. So if people invite you out, like if you don't like drinking alcohol, for example, and trust me, I mean, I know this from experience, pretty much everybody I knew earlier in life, they would just drink all the time. And I never liked alcohol. And I used to try to make myself have a drink every once in a while, and it always felt awful to me. And after enough like rough nights, which weren't many because it didn't really take much for this to stop, I decided like, wait a minute, I don't have any obligation to drink. And of course, then the fear of losing friends, right, which is a very real fear because that's a root chakra fear. Like we are kind of wired to have, even in the brain, there's things called pro-social networks. We are designed in a way to be supported by community, to, the tribal thing is also in our cellular memory, right? There's many levels to wanting to be connected to others. And so it's a very real thing that can come up like, well, if I honor myself, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my friends. And to ultimately, part of how I learned to love myself was to say like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I lose because the way that I try to act for others that is not authentic to me is hurting me. Is hurting me mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so I'm worthy of love. And so I'm going to have to say no. I'm going to have to decline. And just let it be whatever it is, right? And also trust that new things will come into your experience. I will tell you, like, yes, new friends will come into your experience. More health will return to your body because so much of healing the physical body is about having self-respect, self-worth, having a core sense of self. For a lot of empaths that have placed so much their attention on their environment at one point to keep them safe, and also on a higher level as a gift, right? It's also a gift. But to learn how to put more attention in the central channel, which is your own mind, right? So part of that, the journey from going to identified with environment or lost in the sensation or the psychic energy or the collective energy of whatever's going on in the world, right? To start to say like, okay, like I can actually generate frequencies and I can create stability and I can feel myself. I can press myself into reality, into the mind and the body, and I can shine myself into reality instead of simply observing everything in my environment. Right, so for me personally, that was a huge revelation of how I learned to love myself. So another way, right, that was really important for me to learn to love myself. And again, I very well may do an entire course on how to heal the throat chakra because I manifested lots of issues there and I had a lot of organs removed from there. And so I've walked a pretty intense journey of like understanding what would put that back into integrity, right? For me, part of it is that I have been a quiet behind the scenes person my whole life. And part of my soul's evolution is like, no, express your perspective. Like express yourself, like shine yourself into this world. That's the greatest service that we could ever provide, to shine ourselves, like our authentic selves, into the world, because others pick up on that vibration. It's that source vibration of authenticity, and it on some level inspires them to shine, and it inspires them to trust their life and them to let go of things that no longer serve them. But with the throat, like part of learning to love myself was taking action on my intuition, even if it was totally illogical, even if nobody in my world could ever believe me, right? Reconnecting my mind and my heart, right? Creating coherence between my mind and my heart by acknowledging that feminine whisper of intuition and then the male quality of taking action on it, right? So there's so many stories I could tell about that, but that's one of the ways that I learned how to love myself. that no longer needing other people to validate what I felt about reality and to take action on what was real for me, right? Essentially to stay in alignment with myself. That's what alignment has different dimensions of meaning. In the most fundamental sense, alignment is aligned with love, right? But I'm explaining to you the way that love could actually look where the rubber hits the road in the nitty-gritty aspects of life. And so, on that note, one of the ways I learned how to love myself was standing up for myself. And I'll tell you a brief story that I told in another video about a discarnate spirit that essentially attacked me when I was in a retreat in the woods in Georgia. And it was interesting because I woke up at 3 a.m. and this thing was on my causal chakra, attached to me, very stressful vibration. And my first reaction to it was to send it love, or what I thought love was, which was to feel my heart and to just radiate, blast it with love. And it didn't go away. And the next thing I did was my energy got really high, right? And really strong. And I said the names of God in Hebrew, and poof, that thing flew away. And so that was really interesting to me, because what I learned that morning was, oh my God, loving myself is not just feeling my heart. Sometimes it's standing up for myself, right? That was an initiation for me to realize, like, self-love takes many forms depending on the situation. Standing up for myself, raising my energy, having conviction is self-love, right? Of course, if it's not done in the energy of love, conviction can be cold, harsh, and ruthless. But a lot of what my message is about is marrying the male and the female energy, having conviction with love, out of love for myself, out of knowledge of who I am, out of knowledge that I deserve to be safe, right? I've said in many videos that Jesus and many other prophets were exorcists, okay? And sometimes they would just radiate their love, and sometimes they would yank those things out of people, because love is not just soft female energy. It's also strength, an inner strength. So something that I've learned in this lifetime is inner strength, right? Jesus is not, when I tune into him, when I've read channeled books about him, information from the Ascended Masters about him, he is not like Anandamayi Ma, who is like an avatar of Divine Mother. He's like a badass, strong, heart-centered leader. Like his male and female energies are very balanced. So that's a lot about what I talk about. So that's like how I learned how to love myself. And the energy in me that attracted that experience, besides the desire to be initiated into this understanding of inner strength, was also self-deception. So part of the ways that I learned to really love myself is to stop deceiving myself about what is real for me. Like, okay, maybe I'm really not attracted to these people I'm hanging out with. And so what am I doing here? Do I have beliefs? Do I need them do parts of my mind feel disempowered and need them for status, for comfort? Like, the reality, what is real, is that I actually don't feel so good around these people. And that's feedback that I should go elsewhere, right? That my higher mind is saying, no, come over here. You don't need to stay there. You are free. A big piece of this was just realizing I am free. I'm not obligated to do anything that I don't want to do, right? To show up for myself. Self-love is very largely showing up for myself. Showing up for myself, which means, like, if I recognize that, right, there's this delicate balance between allowing and intention. If I realize that I'm maybe out of balance, maybe I'm being too intentional and too tight and too controlling, then I let go. I show up for myself by, like, just letting go, relaxing, doing something fun and playful and artful, or something to relax that energy. If I'm too floaty and I'm too lost in sensation and I don't feel that there's any structure in my life, maybe adding a little structure in my life, right? Whether that's setting some intentions, whether that's whatever it is for you. It's so different for everyone. We're all so different. So love, right, in the most fundamental sense, right, in the non-dual sense, love is unconditional acceptance of everything exactly as it is. And so that's a big part of self-love, right? Unconditionally accepting everything as it is. And that's where I started this conversation. When I was in the depths of addiction, right? My personality had an addiction to self-abuse, to self-deception. So to learn to be soft with myself, to say I can love myself no matter who I am right now. I deserve to be loved, right? That was number one. Number two was, okay, how can I become wiser? Like, how can I learn about how I keep myself stuck in unhealthy, abusive situations? Do I need to educate my mind about self-worth, about self-respect? No matter if there's not even one human in my environment who supports it, nobody in my environment who believes anything that I'm saying, nobody that can validate my intuition, it doesn't matter. To start to trust myself and to move myself into places that are conducive to my safety and my well-being. And a lot of, what we disassociate from and what we lash out about is our own self-rejection. And self-rejection is not only in the form of bullying ourselves into clubbing ourselves about where we are or where we're not. Self-rejection can also be the denial to come back into my body and feel my emotions. That may have been the first video that I ever posted. I am demonstrating live, like what it is like to feel your emotions, right? I'm demonstrating something that was coming up for me. And man, that was the most loving thing I ever did, because now when you decide to consciously feel something, what you're telling your subconscious is, I'm no longer running away from what I've deemed negative and towards what I've deemed positive. I go beyond that, and I'm just completely present with what is, however it is, and therefore I am safe. And so what you're telling the subconscious mind is, we don't live in duality, we are eternal consciousness, and we can be present for whatever is unfolding. So love, depending on the day, the situation, the life you've lived, the qualities that you're here to develop and master, it can look like different things. And hopefully I've illustrated different ways that it has manifested in my life, maybe so that you can expand your definition of self-love. Another part of self-love that I talk about that might be like a hard pill for people to swallow, and it might be something that may be controversial, but to take radical responsibility, to really ask myself, like, if I have abusive behavior in my life, whether it's abusing myself and others, which is ultimately the same thing, because when you abuse others, you're abusing yourself, and when you're abusing yourself, they're inextricably intertwined. Is it true that, am I going to rest on the idea that that's just who I am right now and it is what it is? Is there something I can do? Is there something I can see? Is there a little more attention I can give to a part of myself that is acting out, lashing out? That's part of what self-love is, to look at, like, take an inventory of how you behave and ask yourself, like, just in a very sincere, heart-centered way, is there something I can do about this now? Can I tell the truth more to myself and to others? Can I stop, telling hurtful jokes at dinner? Can I stop doing whatever it is that you do that that you're already aware of is harmful? Because I believe personally that it's a bit disempowering to say, like, well, you only become conscious of something whenever it happens and you have no power over it. But the shadow side of that is that people then neglect to look at what they can see, right? And if you refuse to see something, you cannot be free. So that's yet another way to love ourselves, to look at ourselves. Like, you can't accept yourself unconditionally unless you look in the first place, right? So that's my message for today. Love takes many forms. And I hope I've illustrated this for you, and I hope that it's helpful in some way.